And Yelena, whenever you feel ready and you see the little red light in front of you, that's good to go.
Tess. Okay. On the outset of my delegation today, today is December 5th. On December 17th, it's the International Day to End Violence Against Sex Workers, and a gift that I've given many of you, this zine and this zine, which are the products of our Seed Societal Impact Grant through the McMaster University's Research Shop project that I directed. I wanted to just provide you history. So Annie, Sprinkle, and Robin Few, founders of the Sex Workers Outreach Project of the United States of America, organized a memorial and a vigil on the lawn of San Francisco City Hall for the victims of the Green River Killer in Seattle, Washington, in 2003, December 17, 2003. Gary Ridgway confessed to murdering at least 49 women, most of them sex workers, and was convicted on this day, December 17, 2003. It is now observed annually in cities across the world as the International Day to End Violence Against Sex Workers, and Annie Sprinkle's quote from that day is very appropriate for today's delegation. No matter what you think about sex workers and the politics surrounding them, sex workers are a part of our communities, neighborhoods, and families. This is our presentation. So today I'm going to be showing you our curated accomplishments, and I'd like to ask for I might have to ask it when it gets to the 5 minutes, but I do expect to ask for an extension. Would you like that now or when it occurs?
I think if we want to maybe, if you're thinking you'll know that you'll need an extra 5 minutes, we can do that now.
May I please have an extra 5 minutes?
So it's up to committee. If there's a mover and a seconder, we can proceed with that. I'm seeing a mover in Councillor Wang and a seconder in Councillor Maureen Wilson. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Apologies, Yelena. We do just have to quickly proceed to a little bit of a vote, and then I'll throw it right back to you.
Yeah, thank you.
And so I think our LC is just pulling that up, and we'll be able to have that vote in front of you, committee members, in just a second. If you're on the WebEx and are going to be not voting via eScribe, please just auditorily say something because we can't see you. Or maybe the clerks can see you and I just can't see you.
That vote is carried 5-0.
That vote carries 5-0. There we go. Yelena, back to you, 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Council, for the consideration and committee for the consideration and extra time. So this is our curated accomplishments from SWAP Hamilton. Okay, perfect. So I'm starting off. This is part of our arts-based engagement event, which we facilitated at the YWCA on February 21st and 28th this year at the Safer Use Space. Essentially, what the goal of the okay, there's a leg, I see. Pardon me, the goal of this facilitated art engagement was to engage sex workers and ask the people who access the space at YWCA in their shelter spaces, if we were to create a drop-in space for sex workers, what would that space ideally look like for you? And most importantly, the majority of the art collages that were created related in some way to having a safe home, an apartment, somewhere where they're not homeless, whether that was to see clients or to engage in their hobbies or to engage in thought and dreaming. People spoke about the need for housing to be safe. And the takeaways from that meeting, we think of Barton Street as being the epicenter of the stroll where sex workers, particularly street-based sex workers, work, and it is maligned as being a quote-unquote eyesore. If you want to fix people selling sex in public, you need to fix the housing problem. And of course, that's partially the province's responsibility, and we know that the city has been doing its best. It's just a statement that is factual. We'd like to thank Amy Deschamps, Stephanie Milliken, Unsheltered for our participation and collaboration in this project. Next, we have the results from the Photo Voice project. We had a total of 40 participants in our Hamilton Photo Voice Needs Assessment project in collaboration with YWCA as part of the gender-based safety audit. I opted to provide this delegation today instead of in January when the gender-based violence safety audit report is being given, because I didn't want our presentation to get lost in a sea of presentations. In exchange for their expertise and input, each participant was spoken to like friends and family, received snacks, juice, and water, and a $40 cash honoraria, and most importantly, respect and consideration towards their thoughts, feelings, and experiences. One of the most striking I'm not sure what happened to that image. What was most striking about these images and the input that people gave was that the lack of publicly accessible phones was seen as a major safety concern. And we also see this data reflected in the Hamilton Benefits Community Network consultation through the public, the busing systems, safety for women, street lighting, no access to public phones anymore. One of our participants specifically said that she doesn't feel safe, that when she asks passersby for help, no one will give her help, and then there's no phone. And then when police provide services, often there's stigma, their abuse reports aren't, taken seriously, which is also reflected in the literature review, which I will be presenting. I'm not sure what happened to some of the images. It's probably just the way that it converted. Apologies. All of these women, non-binary people, and gender diverse people said a lot of the same things. Sorry, I know it's not the most high quality. I had to reduce the size in order to get it all here today. But the majority of people were also reflecting that the need for training around sex work sensitivity and understanding of the regulation and the laws that used in the world, there are 5 different types, to regulate sex work is a really big consideration for service providers, municipalities, and the government. This project was very humbling. We participated in this project, as I previously delegated, to ameliorate some of the past problems and harms that were caused by people involved with the Social Planning Research Council, which sort of pitted sex workers against the neighbors and sort of framed them as being involved in organized crime. Newsflash, if your industry was criminalized and you were 2 workers organizing, you would also be organized criminals. So it's a consideration towards people's dignity and safety. Who is allowed to be safe, who it can access safety and dignity. The majority of these women, also as my experience in nursing school, had severe mobility issues. Very, very, these people living on the street who are also selling sex to survive, and they are having severe physical limitations as well in the course of their life. SWAP Hamilton has participated. I was actually hired by the Law Society of Ontario in 2018 in RV Voodoo, which was a constitutional challenge to Canada's sex work laws. A perfect example of how the intersection of racialization, sex work, and again, there's something wrong with the conversion of the images, but a perfect intersection of how racialization, sex work, and drug use is captured erroneously as human trafficking when it's often just domestic abuse related to sex work in a relationship. We've participated in producing and playing a central role in developing survey questions for sex workers for the Transpulse Canada survey, designing recruitment strategies and co-authoring academic articles and research reports for community members and policymakers. One of the most significant findings was that even those who have access to trans and non-binary sex workers, even when they have access to a general practitioner, up to 46% have unmet healthcare needs. And there's also experiences of violence by the police or expectations of negative interactions with police, which are most significantly and disproportionately experienced by racialized, trans, gender, and non-binary people who do sex work. Again, apologies for the conversion of the, but this is the full executive summary of the Research Shop's review from the McMaster University's Office of Community Engagement. I just want to thank Evan Gravely, Shahad Al-Saqqar, Carrie McMullin, Jovana Paramentic, Jeanna Pillainayagam, Anushka Rajaram, and Darren Sajeevan for their help and collaboration with SWAP Hamilton, as well as the Office of the Community Engagement. It has been invaluable. This literature review focused on reviewing all the existing literature in Canada, and here's a very easy to digest infographic about that. So our literature review looked at, and just so we're clear, the Sex Workers Action Program is dedicated to advocating for the decriminalization of sex work, ensuring universal health access, and fostering economic empowerment for sex workers. Our goal is to address systemic challenges faced by sex workers and to support meaningful policy change. So the goal of this literature review is to synthesize existing research on the experiences of Canadian sex workers, focusing on police interactions, healthcare access, and social exclusion, also known as stigma. The focus was on studies published after the 2014 Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act, also known as Bill C-36, which was implemented, spitting in the Supreme Court decision of Terry Jean Bedford v. Canada by Stephen Harper's then Conservative government, which criminalized the sale or trade of sexual services for the very first time in Canada. Our strategy, it reviewed 17 studies published between 2018 and 2023. It included our peer-reviewed articles and community-based reports. Sorry, I hate this desk. I know it's accessible, but it's bugging me. The inclusion criteria involved studies involving Canadian sex workers, that it was published post the implementation of our criminalization regime in Canada of PSEPA, and that it had diverse demographics within the research designs. Some of the keywords we used within this design: disadvantaged, marginalization, healthcare, exclusion, political access, police, isolation, prejudice experiences, law, sex workers, stigma, discrimination, and enforcement. The limitations of our research review is that it excludes undocumented community experiences, so migrant sex workers, unfortunately, or pardon me, not migrant sex workers, but migrant sex workers who are not documented, and limited representation of rural and remote sex workers. The results are that sex workers in Canada experience stigma, victim blaming, and dismissal of abuse reports by police. There's a disproportionate impact on trans and non-binary sex workers who face unreasonable stops and harassment. And immigrant or migrant sex workers encounter racial profiling and heightened surveillance. The result is that widespread of mistrust of law enforcement is experienced by sex workers, deterring sex workers from seeking help in emergencies. The results for the healthcare access showed that there are issues of stigma, condescension, and judgment from healthcare providers, a lack of culturally competent care, which is #1 as your competencies for being a nurse in Ontario, and for immigrant sex workers or migrant sex workers. Nearly 2/3 of sex workers in Canada report unmet healthcare needs, and there are significant mental and physical health disparities, not because they do sex work, but because of how we treat sex workers, just like the same as not because of how trans people don't experience higher rates of suicide and mental illness because they are innately mentally ill. It's because of how we deride them in society and not provide them. Is that 2 minute, 5 minute? What is that? 1 minute?
I think that's probably the 9-minute mark.
Yep, no problem. I'm a long talker. So it also showed that there's significant mental and physical health disparities. What's working for sex workers? Peer support, non-judgmental clinics, and gender-affirming care and that improve those experiences, and experiences of social exclusion. So there is stigma within and outside of the sex work community. There is economic vulnerability, mental health struggles, and isolation. And there are barriers to collective action due to stigma, hierarchies, and criminalization. What's working? Peer support networks, safe spaces for sharing resources, advocacy, and mutual support, such as Swap Hamilton. Recommendations from the research. Decriminalization of sex work. We need to decriminalize sex work and repeal harmful legislation like PSEPA, like the IRPR regulations related to sex work. We need to reform anti-trafficking policies to reflect the voices of sex workers. We need police and healthcare providers to be given anti-stigma, anti-racism, and cultural competency trainings, which Swap Hamilton provides. And future research needs to be done to conduct representative studies, I'm just going to finish this, to capture diverse experiences and challenges, and that we need to establish sex worker-led health services and peer support networks and provide funding and services for community advocacy. I didn't get all of this in. It's in the PowerPoint. Thank you for your time today. And I'm done, right? I just walk away?
Thanks, Jeanna.
Thank you so much.
I can see if there's any questions from committee members in just a second. And if we're also able to just take the slides down, I'll see if the folks online, because we have part of our committee hybrid. Not seeing anyone on the speakers list. If I could just, okay, I've seen Councillor Wang on the speakers list.
Thank you, Jeanna. Thank you for this delegation. Just wanted to, perhaps if you could boil down, you have a lot of information here. And we're speaking as it relates to the gender-based safety audit. You started off your delegation speaking about public phones and how going out into the community is asking for safer spaces. So perhaps you could just boil it down, like what are the key points as it relates to the gender-based audit?
The gender-based safety audit is wonderful because it shows how many of our marginalized communities are disenfranchised from safety, are not allowed to access safety even when those mechanisms are in place for the general population, so to speak. So I think what's most important to take away from this research, the literature review from the research shop for McMaster, is that sex workers, even when we make our best, as municipalities, as governments, as communities, make our best efforts to include them, the criminalization of sex work is the main barrier, and also lack of cultural competency for healthcare workers, for police officers, for social service providers is the main barrier for sex workers, not just equitably, but also effectively and meaningfully accessing these services, whether legal, educational, social, etc., housing. Let me just in the final, during COVID, everyone was encouraged to work from home, but sex workers were getting evicted for doing the same.